All right, Marcus, welcome, man.
Good morning, or I guess good afternoon, actually.
That's
Just after
right.
me, Mark.
Marcus of Great Guys, Colorado. So you and I know each other from a BNI business group, and I've been really impressed with how you are. You have like a Godfather vibe in the BNI group. You've been doing that for a while. You speak incredibly well. You just seem like a seasoned veteran. So can I just jump right in and ask you how you got so good, so comfortable, so natural at networking and speaking?
Well, great question. I mean, my BNI career, if you want to call it that, started about 7 years ago. I, like any new member, was very nervous about standing in front of a group of people, whether it's 15 people or 40 people. Um, it's just practice and experience is really kind of where that came from. As far as the overall confidence when it comes to BNI, I think part of that is in a level of intrinsic nature, if you will. I mean, you've got confident people, and then you've got people that are always very nervous about things. So, the confidence and rolling it into BNI and public speaking and networking and things like that was just very natural for me. The interesting story behind BNI is I had a personal and casualty insurance agent that I was really good friends with, who happened to kind of run that particular meeting. He had the least space that the meeting was held in, and for years he invited me to that. And at those times, we're talking, post 10 years ago, I was working for other organizations and just wasn't really interested in networking and building a business that I didn't really have any skin in the game on. So I kept declining those invitations. So then back in 2018, when I finally started Great Guys, my daughter and I got invited to the meeting, and I was like, no, I'm not going to go. He invited me 4 or 5 times. I finally just told myself, fine, I'm going to go just so he'll stop asking me. That was really the motivation factor of why I went. Because every other networking group you go to, I try to sell what I do to everybody else, and they try to sell what they do to me. And that's really not what networking should be about. So I kind of had that pretense in my brain when I went to the meeting, and relatively quickly, within the first 20 minutes, I discovered it was a completely different platform. Got a referral before I even joined. That referral closed the deal, paid for my membership for probably 10 years over. So right there was the proof in the pudding. I knew it worked, and so I signed up, and I haven't left since. It's
Nice.
been so successful for our organization that we have other members in our company that have joined other BNI groups.
Yeah, there was I got a little emotional when you had everybody in the group. I'm the new guy to the group. I've been in, say, 6 months. And you had everybody in the group who's used Great Guys for HVAC stand up. And like 20, 30 people stood up, and it was quite impactful. I was kind of moved. Tell me, when you started Great Guys, did you jump into BNI right there and then? I mean, because you seem like the most seasoned.
Within about 90 days. Within about 90 days. One of the primary motivating factors for that is, when it comes to your client base or your customers, one of the best things that you can get is a word of mouth referral.
Yeah.
So for the first 2.5 years of our organization, we did absolutely zero marketing or advertising outside of BNI. We were in that very growth phase. We were seeing, double and triple digit growths over the first few years, just because they were all word of mouth referrals. It wasn't until we were about midway through our 3rd year that we started throwing some money towards marketing and advertising. So, I mean, the power of that networking and the power of those word of mouth referrals is just huge.
Wow. That's amazing. Most people do it the other way around. Most people start with their Facebook and Google ads, and then finally decide to get into a BNI. So that's cool. You went the other direction. What about, how do you mentor your team to go into these other BNIs? I mean, do you teach them how to do that with their mustache? Do you show them how to be stylish? What do you do?
Exactly. You have to have at least a 2-inch beard before you can do it. It really comes down to personality trait and culture. I mean, our organization has a very, very strong culture, and we do the typical, proverbial hire slow, fire fast, things like that. You're going to have a minimum of 3 interviews with us. You might even spend a working day interview with us, just to see if those individuals fit our culture, our vibe, and how they want to conduct business. And then, of course, from there, it goes into the individual's personality traits. Some people are just natural communicators and natural people that are social. Those are the individuals, if you can mentor them in regards to where your important business factors are, teach them those factors, and then they're just going to be a natural in that social environment to promote your business.
Yeah. when, I've heard this many times. I've practiced this. I'm trying to get better at this, but the hire slow, fire fast. We too started doing working interviews for SprayNet, our painting business. And that was a big game changer. So you're saying they come into the office. If someone wants to work for your HVAC company and you're determining whether they're a great guy or just a average guy, right? They're coming in for multiple interviews and then you take them on site, or give me that.
Well, generally our first interviews are over the phone or via Zoom, one of those particular types of platforms. We've had some really good success by relocating some members from other states into Colorado. So that's kind of how those interviews start. And then, if those interviews go well, then we'll bring them in to the office for an in-person interview. And then depending upon what position we're hiring them for, and there's two primary factors in my business, in the home service business. There's mindset and then there's skill set. And so both are very, very important, but we're finding that mindset is still much more important than skill set. Skill set is something that you can teach. So if we're bringing in somebody who's had, 1 year, 2 year, 5 year levels of experience, we would then want to get a better idea and fine tune our observations of their skill set. And that's where that working interview comes into play. I mean, just because you say you can install equipment and service equipment doesn't necessarily mean that you can.
Yeah. Do in your game, does everybody get certs on specific, hey, I can do this type of AC, I can do this type of install, or is it a general cert?
It's a general cert. I mean, as our employees become more seasoned, we do put them through different certification classes. Like the majority of our company is NATE certified. And then you can get some manufacturer certifications, like, for example, the Fujitsu mini splits. We install a lot of those. And because we're certified installers, dealers, and distributors of that product, we get the opportunity to offer our clients an additional 2-year parts warranty. So, there's some benefits like that in regards to being certified within different organizations. But overall, kind of the overseeing envelope in our industry is the NATE certification.
Yeah. Now, so you have a phone interview, you have an in-place interview, you have a working interview. Now they're on your team. Now they're working through your system. Who are you bringing in to go to these networking groups? Is it just the sales team, or is it some charismatic installers? How's that all?
Great question. I mean, obviously, the members that we have in there currently are members of our leadership team. So I've got my director of field operations, my COO, they're both in another group. And then I've got a fabulous electrician who we're probably going to, we're going to frame him a little bit better, polish a couple of his skills, and then we'll put him in a group and different things like that. Plumber as well, because we're a multi-affinity organization. And historically, we've been really heavy on the HVAC side. But with a couple of acquisitions, we're wanting to build those other affinities, and I think it'd be a great plan for us to put a member of each of those affinities into different BNI groups so that we can grow those specific areas.
Yeah. So you started Great Guys, 6 years ago?
We just passed our 7-year anniversary on April 19th. So we started April 19th of 2018.
And how many businesses did you start or buy prior to Great Guys?
Oh, goodness.
Is that a big question?
It's a difficult question. I literally have to take my fingers and just count and try to figure it out. There was one organization where we had kind of wrapped up on a somewhat of a protective intrinsic level, to the point where one company was owned by another company, was owned by another company, owned by another company, kind of thing. So we multi-layered that from a protection aspect. It happened to be in the cannabis industry. And It was a really volatile time to be in business because there wasn't a lot of legal frameworks associated to that business. And our organization was ancillary to that particular industry. So we weren't specifically handling the cannabis itself, but we were providing a lot of machinery and items towards supporting that particular industry. So we had a staffing agency, and then we had a sales agency, and then a manufacturing agency, and things like that.
This is why I love having these conversations, because I kind of smelled it, but I didn't know for sure. You're a serial entrepreneur, right?
I am. My parents were entrepreneurs. I remember growing up in my parents' candy factory in South Dakota, packaging lollipops. So if you've ever traveled kind of that region, Montana, South Dakota, North Dakota area, you'd go into a Shopko and there'd be a tree of lollipops. It'd be sitting next to the cash register, and that's what they manufactured, was those lollipops. And I remember being a little kid helping mom and dad package pulling the strawberry and the raspberry and the blueberry lollipops into a box to ship out to clients.
So your dad was Willy Wonka?
No, actually, my dad was Al Bundy. So my mother started the candy factory. My father owned a shoe business.
Okay. Awesome. I cannot seem to stop starting businesses or buying businesses. It's just in my blood. I started in 4th grade mowing lawns. By 5th grade, I was making $100 a day. And I was, I had a red Schwinn and I was off to the races. Right. Yeah. So it gets in your blood. I always like to ask people how they care for, how they steward the capital, specifically the human capital, the people that work for you, right? Every business looks great on a spreadsheet, right? My pro formas look amazing, but boots on the ground, working with other human beings, therein lies the challenge. And I've had partners. Currently, I have an operational partner, Peter Straw, who is, I'm in the traction ecosystem, right? We use EOS traction. He's the operator, he's the integrator. I'm the visionary. Right. So it's a good partnership. How are you managing everybody? Are you at the top? You're the CEO, and then you have, give me the org chart and how you're really taking care of the business and the people.
Okay. Org chart. Yeah, I'm co-founder and CEO at the top. My daughter is our COO, Maddie. Awesome. And very similar to the scenario that you described as yourself being the visionary. I always say that I'm the idea guy. I'm the guy that walks into the CEO's office and say, "Hey, I want to do this." The first thing she does is puts her hand up and says, "Whoa, that's going to affect 15 different areas of our organization. So we can't just flip that switch and make it happen." So we balance out each other really, really well there. And then our org chart next from there would be our director of field operations. His name is Tony Wood. He oversees everything that happens in the field. So he's dealing with the plumbing department manager, the electric department manager, the install manager, things like that. So he's overseeing kind of all of that, almost from a GM role. And then in the office, we've got Brooke O'Rourke. She's our an executive administrator, so she handles everything office related. And then from there, you just go kind of down the line to the individual technicians, and each one of them reports up and help maintain and manage those particular people. We have a weekly meeting that is primarily service staff related, and then we have a monthly all staff meeting and different things like that. So that's kind of how the org chart is organized. And as far as managing the people, you really don't have a business without the people. Right. There's just nothing there. I've been a technician for 30 years in the HVAC industry, all here in the Denver metro area. And so I've worked at a lot of different companies where I know what they did wrong and what not to do. So when my daughter and I really kind of sat down and started the business, we wanted to take a look at what our key factors were. And we really had two of them. One of them was we wanted to have an organization where employees really wanted to come to work. Because I was a technician where some days you wake up and you're just like, I really don't like who I do what I do for. It's never what I do. So nobody quits a job. They quit managers and environments and things like that. And then obviously the other side of that is we wanted to put some core values within our organization that related to the consumer base, because we would see in our industry consumers taking advantage of time and time and time again. So our selling philosophy isn't, I'm a hard salesperson, I have to go out there and sell you this repair or sell you this piece of equipment. It's more from an education and empowerment basis. We're going to show up, we're going to perform our services and our duties, we're going to diagnose, and then we're going to come to the property owner and we're going to say, hey, here are the facts and here's your options. It's your house, your property, your money, your budget. What would you like us to do for you? And then with that builds the really strong relationship. And then there's not a lot of high pressure on the employees to overly perform. They can be just truly authentic and genuine. And I think that that's what our consumers have missed for many, many decades. Yeah. And apparently it seems to be working.
Yeah. Well, you guys are obviously successful. And I like you kind of beat me to the question. I always ask people about their values. And, we set up in our organizations, we set up 5 values, because if you've got 50 values, you don't have any values, right? We have, even if you have 10, 10's too many. So we set up 5 and we work at articulating those values to each other, me and my partner, and to the team multiple times a month. So, Kaizen is one of our values. So we have a thing where if an employee makes a little improvement in the SOP, they yell out Kaizen. right? And when we in our text, we send Kaizen, and then we send some funny cartoons and stuff.
Very cool.
Are your values written down? Are they articulated to the team? Tell me about that.
I say that right behind me in the board behind me over my left shoulder here is our core values, which is trust, community, kindness, and community. And then on the right, you see our mission statement, which is do right, be great, and improve lives. So my daughter and I came up with the do right, be great, and improve lives. As far as our core values are concerned, that was, believe it or not, an entire team event. So we did basically an in-service meeting, and we had every single employee we broke them up into groups of 2 or 3. We put them in different corners of the room with a great big white draw board. And we said, hey, write down what's important to you ethically, morally, and within business. And we probably had a list of 40 or 50 things. And then collectively, we just narrowed it down to that 4. And then we just, very similar to you, we regurgitate those things every single day. We've got posters up all over our company, all over our office that say that. And somebody will call in, one of our technicians might call in and say, hey, I've got a question on how I should handle this situation. We say, well, does it fit our core values? Does it fit our mission statement? And then thirdly, does it fit the win-win-win philosophy? The customer has to win, the technician has to win, and then the company and the greater community have to win. And we use that language during that particular process. And we ask, and most of the time, the employee figures it out for themselves. Then they're going to present an option, and we're going to say, hey, go for it. We empower our employees to make those decisions.
I love it, man. We did the same thing in my living room right here, where everybody was in the living room. We all had our pieces of paper and our notebooks. We decided together what our values are. Now, Peter and I kind of led. And this is part of the EOS system, right? The entrepreneur operating system, the traction system. And articulating those, identifying those, posting those, talking about those, deciding on those together is a game changer. So I love that. Let me give you one. Here's my pro tip.
Okay.
I used to, because I'm at the top of the org chart, right? And I used to be the fix it guy, right? If there's a problem, they'd call me and I'd figure it out, right? That is not sustainable for me at all. No. So I forget where I got this. I got this from somebody on YouTube, but they call it the 131. So an employee calls you, I've got a problem. Okay, give me the 131. Here's the problem. Here's 3 potential solutions that I came up with. And here's the one solution I choose. And that's what the tech, that's what our lead, whoever's in the field, they bring me the 131. And I'm telling you, dude, 95% of the time, the one they choose is the one we go with. Right? And then we made another, and even Peter, Peter and I are equals. He's the integrator. I'm the visionary. He'll come to me with a problem. I'll say, give me the 131, or I'll come to him with a problem. He'll say, give me the 131. So we make sure that these SOPs, these standards, everything is the same for the person at the top and the same one, masking the doors and drawers in a kitchen. So it's huge. It's a game changer. The other thing we do, tell me, do you do this? We said, hey, if you can fix this problem on your own for $300, you have the green light to fix it for $300. You don't even have to call and ask me. If you're going to send $500, okay. If that, whatever it is, do you give them a little rope there?
Absolutely. We give them the empowerment. So in our particular pricing model, the old model of the home services industry was, hey, here's your labor rate and here's your parts plus profit or whatever. That particular practice has been long abandoned. And the majority of the home services industry, in our affinities, plumbing, heating, electrical, and cooling, generally are what we call flat rate. So what we've done is we've taken, the 100 things or the 150 things that can go wrong with a system, and we've broken it down into 7. So those are our 7 flat level pricing. And then we have what we call our standard rate and our member rate, and they vary by 15%. And so if somebody's a member of our organization, they're part of our maintenance practice plug, they get that preferred membership rate. But we also empower each of our technicians. For example, if one of them came out to your house and you were not a member, and they diagnosed the problem, they're going to show you the straightforward pricing guide, and they're going to say, hey, look, here's your pricing. The first thing your eyeballs do is run in between standard and VIP price. And every employee is empowered to, if they need to help close a deal, drop that price by 15%. They don't have to call us for that. That's not it. And they also have the ability to, for example, if you chose to replace your system, the employee has the opportunity, and about 99% of the time it happens, where they waive today's service fees. So anything that we've done today related to cost disappears if you choose to upgrade your equipment. So that level of empowerment is absolutely and certainly there. I mean, most of my staff, Brooke in the office or Tony is the director of field operations. Both of them are empowered to make decisions up to $1,000 outcome. Love it.
Love it. And I love the membership model. I've been in the room where you've presented what you guys do. And I've used many HVAC companies for my investment properties. I mean, I've put some HVAC owners' kids through college, right? I mean, we've spent some money. And never have I seen anything as thorough as yours, as analytical as your service, as data-driven as your service. Is everybody in your chain, are they as detailed and as data-driven as you are with your presentation? I was just really impressed with that.
Well, thank you. I mean, I've had a lot of practice doing it, but in regards to that, we try to drive the details. A lot of those details are supported by our CRM. We use Service Titan as a software platform, which gives us a tremendous amount of tools as far as documentation, as far as verifying the details. There's a process within that software that we call the encyclopedia. And in that process, if I'm looking at the screen or my customer service representative is looking at the screen, they'll see your name at the top with your address, your contact details, and then the specific job. And in that particular job, it'll list the time that you called. It'll record that call. If you left a message, it'll then list that my person called you back, and it has a recording of that call. It has when the technician was dispatched, when the booking was sent out, when the technician got there, and then the technician takes pictures of everything before and after, and all of those stuff's recorded in there. So from the back-end support side, that level of detail is built into our SOP, 100%. Now, in regards to the individual employees, there's a little bit of training and polishing there. Like you might have one technician that has in the summary of his invoice, fixed furnace, and that's it. Clearly that doesn't provide the details that the consumer's wanting. So that's what we do during our service meetings is we train people on that particular aspect. Share with the consumer what you did. I diagnosed this was failed, I got approval for this, and then I replaced the blower motor, and it's all listed out. And then it makes sense, and it alleviates calls from that consumer to the office saying, hey, I've got an invoice that says fixed furnace. What does that mean? So we try to provide that level of detail all the way down.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, we work on that as well. When we're, someone says, hey, do you paint cabinets? Yeah, we paint cabinets, but we also, degrease them, chemical clean them, sand them, grain fill them, prime them, tack coat, and then put our fancy coating on, right? So to say we paint cabinets is inaccurate, right? Just like fixed furnace. That's not going to do it,
Right.
What do you put in your CRM? What's the name of the CRM again?
It's called Service Titan.
Service Titan. In that CRM, are there things that your techs have to check off?
100%.
Yeah.
100%. So the versatility of that particular software is absolutely amazing. And I'll give you a particular kind of a road bump or speed bump, if you will, that we experienced in that. With my level of experience being a technician, I know what it's like to run those service calls, to communicate with that consumer, to gather the model numbers and serial numbers and all the data that's needed. Okay. When you have a service technician that's only 1 year old in their experience level, they're not going to know that particular same level. So what we do is we build all these forms, and those forms say, are you going to be replacing a boiler or servicing a boiler? And, there's conditional logic built into the software. And if the person answers no, then that form goes away. Are you going to be servicing a swamp cooler? No, that form goes away. So we built all these forms, and they were optional. And they were optional for about a year. And we kept begging and pleading, please do your forms, do your forms, do your forms. And nobody would do it. So now they're mandatory. Mm-hmm. So now that technician literally has to do those forms and collect that data before they can close out of that sales call or service call and move on to the next one.
Right.
So
that's great.
The repetition is there, the accountability is there, etc.
Yeah, and your CRM allowed you to enter those forms and essentially do a stack. We started using, we had a hodgepodge of our tech stack was a hodgepodge for Spraynet, the painting company. And we integrated Company Cam. I'm sure you've heard of Company Cam.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we've been there.
Yeah, and so we added those, we call them SOPs, but it's just a checklist that the sales guy has to go through, right?
Yeah.
And have to document everything. And then it essentially outlines the whole job. Yep. And then the lead painter, the masker, nobody can move on from their job until they take pictures of the thing completed, and then they communicate it to everybody and move on. So when I say everybody, the client gets pictures. Hey, everything's degreased, right? Everything's power washed, everything's chemical cleaned, everything, and so they feel far, far more comfortable. The client, that is, they feel far more comfortable when they're getting updated, right? Instead of, yeah, there's some guys in my house who are doing stuff. I don't know when they're going to be done. I don't know their names. I don't know anything. No, they're like, oh, Manuel did this, right? Duvon just did this. And they'll see the progress through the whole day. It's really, really cool.
Yeah, that is very cool. I mean, we did the same thing when we first started, and, had a hodgepodge of different software platforms. And obviously we brought Zapier in to be able to get them to talk to each other and do the different things like that. So, managing those expectations and being able to provide that particular level of service provides all that comfort to the consumer, without a doubt.
Yep. I mean, communication is everything, right? And you're obviously, very good communicator, and you're training the people under you to be good communicators, and your tech stack supports that communication, because without it, you got nothing, right? I mean, that's, dare I say, more than half the battle in running a business is how well you communicate.
Yeah. It's not more than half the battle, for sure. I mean, it's all in the details. You mean, like our installers will go to install a furnace or an AC, first thing you do is they knock on the door. They don't have any tools or anything with them. They're just right there in their uniform. The consumer has been notified which employees are coming via our CRM. There's a picture of that particular employee that pops up on that cell phone or email and says, hey, this person's on their way. They get there, they knock on the door, they say, hey, my name is Jacob, and I'm here to install your air conditioner today. Is there anything that I need to be concerned about? Is there dogs? Is there pets? Do we need to keep the back door closed, etc.? They have that conversation. They manage that expectation. The job's going to take 4 hours, 6 hours, 8 hours, etc. That management of expectation at the beginning resolves 90% of potential issues, problems, or questions. And then they go back out to the truck, they bring in their drop cloths, their floor protection material, and their tools, and they get to work. Yeah.
Yeah. You know what clients want, what humans want, is they want to be heard.
Yep.
It's really that simple. They want to be heard and not told. They want to be heard. Okay, now I'm going to get into the advice portion of our chat here, Marcus.
Okay.
So we bought our painting business. We bought an operational painting business last year. We also bought a couple more territories and first right of refusal for everything that touches us. And if you could go back, 7 years ago, or let's say 6 years ago, what advice, what things do you wish you knew? What should I know in starting this, building this foundation, scaling it? Give me some words of wisdom.
God, I don't know if we have enough time in a 24-hour podcast for that. I mean, I can tell you a couple of key milestones and a couple of really good lessons that I learned throughout the process. I would say one of the most pivotal ones, about a little over the 2-year mark, probably 2 years and 1 quarter into this, we were doing just over $2 million in revenue. And I felt like the wheels were starting to, vibrate and fall off the bus I was driving. I'm a historical technician. I'm not a CEO. I'm not a business owner. I'm not a general manager. I was a technician who said, hey, let's start a business and see what happens. So I hired a consulting firm to help guide me through the next process. So when I recognized that I needed some help. It's like they say, the 3 hardest things to say are, I'm sorry, I need help, and we're Chestershire sauce. I knew that I needed some help, so I asked for it. I went out and I hired a consulting agency, and and they came in and they worked with us for about a week in all of the different departments. And during my first kind of consulting review and advice session, this person says to me, they says, Marcus, you are driven, you are motivated, and you are climbing that mountain, and you will get to the top. But you are trying to drag every person in your organization with you. Have you ever stopped to think that maybe some of them don't want to climb the mountain? And that hit me, Chris, like a ton of bricks. I mean, that was a Thursday afternoon, and by Monday, I had already completely developed how I was going to manage my crew and my team members. It kind of changed from, hey, everybody, we're all in this together, to here's a hand up, not a hand out. If you want to develop, if you want to move up, if you want to improve your skills, we're here to help you do that. And that became one of our core management aspects of our employees. Just like a father or a parent of a child, you want to have a very well-rounded, balanced child. Same thing goes for our employees. If their personal lives are chaos, guess what? Their working lives are chaos.
Yeah.
So we try to provide resources to try to help round out those employees and make them all wonderful. So reach for help whenever you need it. That was a big lesson for me. And when I was a technician, there were times where I was treated horribly. There were times where, here's a great story. My son, God, he was probably 5 years old at this time, was very, very ill. And my wife and I were both working full-time jobs. And so it was difficult because this child had to stay home. And this was about a 10-day process that he overcame this virus that he had. And so we were trying to alternate days back and forth. And I was working for an organization, and they would not let me take the day off. They refused to allow me to do it. So I had to bring my son into work, put him in my office, and he slept on the floor. The very next day I gave notice. That was not an environment that I as an employee enjoyed. And I would never in 100 million years expect one of my employees to go through that level of experience.
Yeah.
So don't be afraid to do anything and everything that your employees do. I've had my employees come to me and say, wow, you're the owner of the company and you're out here on a roof. I'll climb a ladder. I'll get on my knees. I'll go through a crawl space. That provides a lot of value and loyalty to your employees because they recognize that every single person in our organization is willing to do whatever it takes to get the job done. To meet the level of expectation. So that, those were a couple of key factors there. Now, kind of back to the business side of things, I would have looked for acquisitions sooner than I did. So we were 2018 founded, 2021, we did our first small electrical acquisition. And then most recently, last August, we did an acquisition of a plumbing organization.
Wow.
I knew at the beginning that we were going to get there. The name of our parent company is Great Guys Home Services, doing business as Great Guys Colorado. Mm-hmm. The reason we did it that way, because we didn't do Great Guys Heating and Cooling. We didn't do Great Guys Electric or Great Guys Plumbing. We did Great Guys Home Services. And then it just kind of collaborated. Now, of course, there's Great Guys Colorado, because who knows? Someday there might be a Great Guys Texas or a Great Guys Arizona.
Yeah.
So that forward thought process thinking is definitely have to be laid out. So if you can map that process out and set some goals and some milestones as to what that process looks like, that's very helpful in the process as well.
Yeah, that's great. I'm very interested in all that. So tell me about your acquisitions. Let's talk about that.
So, this is going to wrap back around into networking, which is kind of one of the reasons and how you and I met each other. Mm-hmm. I belong to a variety of different networking groups now, since we're such a seasoned organization, it's primarily BNI. But while I was networking within those other organizations, I met an electrician. And that electrician had recently moved from California to Colorado, had a family of 4. Absolutely fabulous electrician. And he needed to generate some business. So he joined this networking group. So him and I met together, and we subcontracted to him for, about 11 months. Great quality of work. Not a very good business operator. So he struggled in that. And I had a big thought in my head. I'm like, okay, should I mentor this gentleman in business, or should I ask if he wants to kind of join our organization and have me acquire his business, and basically he can just do what he loves to do and be a really good electrician. He doesn't have to worry about anything on the backside of the business, the vehicle repair, the insurance, all those overhead costs and decisions that need to be made. So that's what I did. I approached him and I said, how would you feel about me just buying your business, doing an asset acquisition and an employee retention? That was another thing that I learned from the consulting firm. When you're in a acquisition scenario, you never really want to buy the business, because when you buy the business, you're also buying the liability.
Yeah.
It can be very, very scary. If somebody out there is doing poor quality work and that business gets sued and you've bought in that business, and you now have that liability on your hands. Mm-hmm. So frame your acquisitions to be asset acquisitions and employee retention. So if you're gonna purchase a company proverbial for $1 million that has 15 employees, you're gonna have some retention, you're gonna have some attrition. Some of those employees aren't gonna want to come. But if you do an employee retention agreement with the key parties of that particular company, you've got them locked up to help assist with the organizational challenges that come when the two businesses come together. So that was another key factor. One of the things that our organization does a little bit different in that aspect is every single employee has a different employment agreement with our organization. We're not one of those companies that says, hey, your first year, you're going to make this many dollars an hour. And then after 6 months, you're going to make a 65-cent raise and blah, 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 blah. We never do that. We hire our employees and we never ask them to go backwards. If an employee comes to me and he says, hey, I was making $26 an hour, I'm not going to say, hey, I'll give you a job for $24 an hour.
Right.
That's insulting. We don't ever do that. So every one of them has an individual employment agreement. Obviously, it's our core operating agreement with an amendment to that operating agreement for their compensation package aspect of things. So
okay.
3 weeks of vacation, I'm not going to say, hey, you only get one. So sometimes there's a negotiation factor involved there if something has some strange idiosyncrasy. A great example of that is we have a gentleman who's a single father. And when school is out, he has to take care of his daughter. Obviously, his mother helps him with that. But then also during school, he has to have his daughter picked up by a certain time every day. So we modify his schedule. And it's in his amendment of his compensation agreement that is a privilege that we agreed when we hired him. So that versatility and being able to adapt a little bit to those employee needs is going to build that loyalty, and that employee is going to stay without a doubt.
Well, that's right. I really like the fact that you operate that way, and everybody wants something different, right? Money is not the only thing that everybody wants. Money is one of the things, right?
Of course.
Money, free time, vacation time, responsibility, less responsibility. Maybe they don't want to run their, like you said, they don't want to run their business. I think this is ideal that I'm talking to you right now because our parent company is Premier Surfaces LLC, and I specifically formed it to work the lower risk, non-regulatory risk property services stuff, right? Power washing, painting, window cleaning, stuff like that. So Premier Surfaces bought SprayNet, right? Okay. Premier Surfaces does these acquisitions to do these other, again, what I consider certainly low regulatory risk. We don't have plumbers. We don't have engineers. We don't have, HVAC has kind of a higher level of responsibility. And it's certainly our intention to acquire more companies or to acquire more services as we go along. So it's kind of ideal. Can you give me the pace? When did you know you were ready to acquire the electrical guy? When did you know you were ready to acquire a plumber? How?
So it's a great question. Because somebody can acquire 5 different companies at once, and next thing you know, they're so overloaded they don't know what it's going to do, and all 5 organizations are going to fail. So about that same time that we hired the consulting firm, when the wheels were falling off the bus, we did a lot of foundational work backwards, if you will. At that time, I didn't have an official operating agreement. I didn't have, an official handbook. I didn't have a lot of those bases that companies really truly need, because when I started the business, I'm like, hey, we're going to give this a shot. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, we're not. So I wasn't going to spend, $50,000, $100,000 kind of building that framework and then start the business to see if it was going to happen. But our growth happened so fast, it caught up with us, and then we hired the consulting firm and put the foundation in there. So to answer your question about when we felt confident and ready, I would say it would be when we had our very good base leadership team. We knew who our core people were in the corners, the right butts were in the right seat. So we had replicated the operational procedures, we had replicated the service call procedure. Those SOPs were all set in place, and we were operating, and I hate to say this because it's never really true, but a well-oiled machine. You try to get to that as close as you can, and we were pretty darn close to that. And a lot of what we do in HVAC requires a tremendous amount of electrical as well. So it was very complementary and supplementary to one another, without a doubt. And then we'd worked with this gentleman as a subcontractor for almost a year, and we appreciated his quality of work. So we just alleviated his problems. Yeah. And then we acquired that particular company, and he followed right into place with our SOPs and everything like that. We removed all the stress. And when we acquired the plumbing company, it was very similar. He's a gentleman who'd been a plumber for 30 years. and he's looking at close to being retired, and he just didn't want to handle the management side of the business. There was way too much stress involved. He'd gone through a marriage because that stress level was too high, and he lost his marriage because of it. So when it came time to acquire that particular business, it was very similar in regards to looking at their reviews, looking at their books, looking at their balance sheets, seeing where the potential financial opportunities were, and then looking at the mindset. So the letter of intent went out. We got the financials. The financials looked good. And then it was, okay, what employees of his organization do we want to have come over? Which one of those, which two of those, which three of those people fit our culture? And we brought over two. So we did the asset acquisition, and then we did an employee retention agreement with two of his employees. So
nice.
Once you've got the well-oiled machine, it's easy. And if you have a business platform in we'll call it the home services industry, once you have that SOP fine-tuned, it's applicable to almost anything home service related.
Yeah.
Lawn mowing, garage doors, painting. Once you have that replicated process, you can filter it into any of those home services, and I think you'd be quite successful.
Yeah. I focus on real estate and real estate adjacent companies. So I come from, the last 20, 21 years, I've been buying, investment properties, buying real estate, anywhere from single family to multifamily to farmland. I worked some private equity funds, bought some packages, stuff like that. And now I just and then last year I started buying adjacent companies, meaning companies that could be of service to this portfolio, where I might be a limited partner, I might be a general partner. And, we actually bought two. We bought a Streamline Business Media, or launched Streamline Business Media, which is what we're doing here. This is what, this video goes into Streamline Business Media's, I call it the sausage factory, and it chops it up and it turns it into long form, short form chapters and posts it. Right. And then we bought SprayNet, and with a little hubris, I think I was I was coming off some good deals, and I thought I got a little over my skis. We'll put it that way, where I acquired two deals at the same time. I should just have acquired one, stabilized it, got the next one. Now, so it's been a little chaotic stabilizing two companies at once. We're happy we're doing it now, a year later, when everything's settled down. Tell me the pace of which you brought on new acquisitions. Was it one a year? Did you ever do two a year? Are you?
We haven't done 2 years. We've been in business now for 7 years, and we've had two acquisitions. That first one happened year 3. The second one happened year 6. So it's about one every 3 years, if you will. I think I could probably do one every 2 years now. We've got some targets and some goals in regards to primarily revenue-based growth at this particular point. Again, that goes back to the fact that our foundations and our SOPs are so replicated and they're so fine-tuned. We have the leadership team, where, again, like I said, right butt, right seat. All of that is built. So that framework is built. Now we just need to pour gasoline on this thing. Turn that campfire into a bonfire that can be seen for 5 miles. Really, really build this thing up revenue-wise, because everything else is in place. Yeah.
Impressive, man. I mean, I knew you were impressive from the data that you were sharing with me in your presentation and your kind of charisma and BNI, but this doesn't surprise me that you've started, you've done a startup, you've acquired other companies. I really do like the asset and the employee retention. That employee retention part. Without that, you might be missing a few legs on that stool,
Oh, absolutely. 100%. I mean, if you look at, when I'm looking at a lot of different data and specifics associated to our organization, one of the big ones that I talk about all the time is called customer acquisition cost. What's your marketing, what's your advertising, what's your overhead, what goes into acquiring new customers, et cetera. But on the opposite side of that is what goes into employee retention. A key factor. We don't work Saturdays and Sundays unless it's emergencies. Why? Because my employees should be at home spending their time with their families, whether it's hiking, whether it's snowboarding, or whether it's taking their kid to a baseball game. That's important to employees. And when they know that their employing organization helps support that element, it builds that loyalty and it builds that trust, just like BNI, know, like, and trust. If your employees have that same feeling about their employer, they're going to stay there. We also do team building events. I mean, we did an event 3 quarters ago called Archery Dodgeball. where the employees all got together. We went into this gymnasium type environment. Literally everybody had crossbows and they were shooting arrows that had a Nerf ball on the end of it. It was an absolute fabulous time. We do community outreach projects. We've done neighborhood cleanups. We've cooked meals at homeless shelters. Those types of things, not only are team building, but they're community building. And employees want to be part of that. That's huge.
Yeah.
My daughter brought in this claw machine, like the old carnival claw machines, got the joint, and comes down and picks stuff up. So we have one of those in our office. And inside of it are these little stuffed animals with a tag. And each one of those tags has something different on it. An extra PTO day, a 90-minute massage, lunch with the boss, a $200 tool credit or whatever. And how they get to play that game is when when not just us as leadership, but when another employee recognizes another employee going above and beyond. They get a coin. They take that coin over to the claw machine. And it's absolutely hilarious watching 30 to 50-year-olds play this carnival game like they're 15. It's absolutely wonderful. And that's just, the machine probably costs $2,500. $500 for that particular level of team building is nothing in the long run, but they absolutely they enjoy it. Another thing we do is we have Thanksgiving dinner in our office. So last Thanksgiving, we had 27 people in our office. Everybody brought something. Everybody, each person potlucked a deal, things like that. Everybody loves it because then they can go home and they don't have to clean up a whole house full of mess. It's wonderful.
Nice.
Things that we do to help
this is great. I got to have you on the pod every month, man. I'm learning a lot here. So you're dare I say, and I know nobody's mastered anything, but dare I say you're a master of employee retention, or at least treating people like people, right? Not like numbers on a spreadsheet, right? That's that's the approach we have. First and foremost, there's a soul in there. It's a soul, right? That's first. Towards the later in the spectrum, they're an employee and they got a job to do and all that. And then I also love the fact that you're not dragging them across the finish line, right? You're giving them a hand up, but not a hand out. I love that quote.
We apply that. One of the areas that we really apply that is to skill set training. So we post, on our employee poster boards around the office, what different classes are coming up from different suppliers or manufacturers. If any single one of those players wants to take that class, whether it's a $40 class or a $400 class and it takes a month, they come to us and we pay for the class. They have to donate their time. So we're not paying for their labor and their education, but we'll pay for the education. Because that education is a staple in their resume. It develops them as a better technician, gives them a better skill set. And guess what? They become a better, more efficient employee.
How are you identifying the employees that will do that? How are you identifying early in the game? I know it's high or slow, but how are you? Give me some red flags. Give me some green lights.
Green lights would be somebody coming to me, and this happened about 3 or 4 weeks ago. I had an employee who was hired as an HVAC technician, and during his interview process, he was limited on his skills for hydronics and boilers. So I approached him and said, hey, these classes are coming up. I want you to just kind of look at them and let me know if there's anything that you want to take. I left it in his ballpark. I provided the opportunity, and he came back to me and said, yeah, I would like to take this one, this one, this one. So there were 3 of the 8 classes that were offered that he wanted to take. So he took the initiative to come back to me and say, yes, I want to do that. It's kind of like dangling the carrot out there. I'll give you this carrot. If you want to take a bite of it, come follow it. Obviously that's a green light. The red flag would be is I offered opportunities to take classes on multiple occasions, and that employee said no every time. That's a little bit of a red flag. We say right butt, right seat, or we say he's the right butt right now, meaning that there's got to be a limit to that particular employee's lifespan within our organization. If we set a requirement, for example, hey, this employee comes on and we require them to be NATE certified by this date. If that date goes past, then we have another difficult conversation and say, hey, we've set this expectation. You have failed to meet that expectation. We're going to move the expectation another 3 weeks and give you another opportunity. If that employee then passes that deadline, then again, that that's going to be a limitation of that particular person's growth within our organization.
Yeah, that is great, man. I'm learning a ton here. I think anybody who runs a property service, company should be listening to you. One thing I learned from Peter, my partner, he talked about, the few things that require instant termination, right? And that is if the values are broken. Giving
100%.
them a second swing at a certification is absolutely reasonable. Peter says your values are something you're willing to lose money and friends over. Otherwise, they're not real values, right?
100%.
So would you agree if some value?
Absolutely. I agree 100%. I mean, I had to terminate an employee for violation of our vehicle use policy. Our service vans are provided to that employee by us. They're allowed to use that vehicle to drive to and from work. We had an employee who was using that company asset outside of business hours, non-working, and he violated that policy. We pulled him in. We don't give a 3-strike rule. We give generally a 1 or a 2-strike rule. We pulled him in and we said, hey, look, we've verified this. We found this. We've got pictures proving it. This is something that can't happen. It has to stop immediately. And if you're caught doing it again, the next conversation we have is going to be a much different conversation.
Yeah.
He violated that policy again and we terminated him.
Right.
And he was one of my strongest skill set technicians.
Well, there it is right there. So even if they're the best tech or the best sales guy or the best whatever, if they are not a value match, they have to go. Even if they're putting $1 million in your pocket, again, if it's a real value, you're willing to lose money and friendship over it.
There's one more piece to that you haven't mentioned that's absolutely vital to the organization. Yes, you're going to lose money by terminating that valued employee. Yes, it hurts because that employee's been a friend. But if you don't follow that particular role or you don't take those actions, what example does that set to the rest of the organization and the rest of the employees? One bad apple ruins a barrel, as they say. So if one person gets to break the rules, the next person thinks they can.
That's right. And you've just chopped the legs out of your value stack, right? Or you've just showed everybody your values don't mean squat, right?
Yeah. So you have to follow that.
Yeah.
That's a hard line. If you step over the line, you're gone.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong. I mean, you're saying that you've learned a lot about this in home services and you think everybody in the home services industry should listen to this. I've gotten to where I've gotten because of the mistakes I've made.
Yeah.
Here we are 7 years later, I'm making $300 mistakes, not $300,000 mistakes. Some of those mistakes have been very, very expensive, so it's a process,
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to fail. And when you fail, you put your boots back on, you get back up, you do it again, and you learn from the mistakes. That's where the level of growth and the level of success that we've seen within our organization. And it's not just me. It's taken my entire organization to get there, and primarily my leadership team. We are aligned so perfectly in leadership. That's what gives us the ability to grow this thing. Yeah.
Your wise words, right? You don't learn anything when you win. You learn a lot when you lose, Yeah. I have this saying, God will send you a little butterfly to whisper in your ear. If you don't listen to that, he'll send you a bee, sting you. Eventually, he'll send you a mountain of crap on your head, and you're going to listen to that. Yep. So, I'm with you. You learn a lot more when you lose. And dare I say, you might not even learn anything when you win.
There's been businesses that I've had to close because I have made mistakes. It happens. But here I am. I came back to the batting cage and taking some more swings.
Yeah, get in the game and stay in the game, right? That's another saying. Just we're in the game, we're on the field, let's stay, right?
Yep.
Okay, we're going to get a little better, but first things first, let's stay in this game, So,
here's another example, like football. You're watching a professional football game, right? The audience and everybody within the arena is like, oh my God, why did the coach make the decision to make that play? The coach didn't make that decision. It's the 15 guys that are up in the booth. They're taking the data from decades and decades of situations that are exactly like this. That game repeats itself, and then the booth upstairs says something to the coach, and the coach says something to the quarterback, and that's how that game is played. So it's not one person leading that entire pack. It's an entire group of leadership that is making that team successful.
Yeah.
And that applies to business as well.
Yeah. Marcus, you're the man. I'm going to tell you this, and I'm not just blowing smoke. I'm going to listen to this again so I can, get better at what I do. I'm going to have my partner Peter listen to this podcast. I'm going to suggest anybody in home services listen to this podcast. And I'd love to, chat with you again sometime and get more.
Absolutely.
You're as wise as your mustache is cool, my friend.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. We'll talk soon. I appreciate you.
You got it, man. Have a great day.
You too, brother.